Hello everybody, Demon Redmurst here, and it is 3 minutes past midnight, so I'm on quite late today. But I've come on to do the Nurburgring GP track guide for the Red Bull Junior, for the DGT League drivers, and for myself. I came on to do a few laps for myself, get a base setup done. Yeah, so I figured I'd do the track guide while I'm here. Just bear with me a second. I'm just gonna share the link on the Dynamic GT League Facebook page, and then I'll crack on with it. Now, yesterday we did the DGT League Race 3. Sorry, just bear with me. Post this. Can't type and talk about two different things at the same time. Yeah, we had the race last night around Le Mans, and well, it was a successful one for me. And coming to this track, Nurburgring GP, it's a completely different animal. There is not really any decent straights. There's the bendy back straight, but even then you're not going to get up to much more than 160 mile an hour. So going from Le Mans to here, a few people may struggle a little bit maybe with setups. Now I just want to let everybody know that in Le Mans I ran still running a standard setup with one adjustment to the suspension, which was this same adjustment that was made at Brazil. That is the only adjustment to the standard setup other than wings and gears. Now, around the Nürburgring GP track, I have done a few laps already, having a look at sort of a ballpark aero setup. And to be honest, around this track, you need traction, you need high speed or medium high speed grip, and the best of that comes when the rear wing is on maximum. Now I started off with 745 on the front and was getting a hell of a lot of oversteer, right? Well, I was getting quite a bit of understeer and then a hell of a lot of oversteer. I thought about increasing the front wing, but then I thought, well, no, because that won't help me with the oversteer. So I then reduced the front wing to 725, and it was considerably more stable. I wasn't getting the oversteer. The understeer was nowhere near as bad, but there was a couple of corners where I just didn't quite have the front end grip. So I've gone to 735 on the front, and that seems to have given a fairly nice balance. I can't see me changing the front wing much more than what it's on at the moment. I may adjust it 2 or 3 in one direction or another by the time we come to the race, but that's going to be it. Unless I find that knocking 100 off both of them works brilliantly, but that's not been my experience in this car. Okay, the gears. This is the gear setup I've got on at the moment. It's very different to what I used at Le Mans. Le Mans a one-off because of the long straight, so the gears was set up for that. Here is a completely different track, but what a few people may struggle with is losing rear traction. So losing grip at the rear and automatically assuming that it's just oversteer. Technically it is, but it could be oversteer induced by short gears. The shorter the gears, the more aggressive they are. The more aggressive they are, the more chance there is of spinning the wheels. You can test this yourself. I mean, take first gear, move it all the way to the right, see how much wheel, and do a standing start, see how much wheel spin you get. Then move it all the way to the left, do the same standing start and see how much wheel spin you don't get. And that's a perfect example of it. Now this track is a little bit tricky when it comes to setting up the gears, because I did have a look at going, okay, well what about if I had a sort of long first gear and a long second gear, maybe even a long third gear, and then going shorter fourth, fifth, sixth. It didn't quite work. I found a bit of a fine line between length of gear, but this is the gears that I'm on at the moment. I can't imagine first, second and third changing much from it at all, or fourth, to be honest, because for me the gears are very important when it comes to the cornering. So yeah, right. Anyway, feel free to try my gears if you wish. Okay, I'm going to head out onto track. I'm going to do a couple of laps. Then I'll do a corner by corner guide, and then I'll probably do another couple of laps. Now, this is a track where it's not going to be dead easy to overtake on. There are going to be overtaking opportunities, but chances are you're either going to have to go off the racing line to make the moves, which means you're on the dirty bit of the track, or on the bendy back straight you're heading into a very, very tight chicane. You can go side by side around a lot of this track, but be aware you are going to have to leave room, and then if you are on the dirty part of the circuit, your car's not going to like it. Personally though, I have to say, well, I don't have to, but I'm fucking going to, I absolutely love this track. I always have done, and that is because there's a bit of hill, but there's a lot of camber. The corners are pretty much made to not throw you off the track, but to help you go round the corner, and I absolutely love that, and I love this track. There is definitely a flow to this circuit, and a lot of it does start at turn 1. But we'll see how we get on anyway. Okay, just something I want to mention as well. When you're coming out of the pit lane, if you want to know when to pit, that white line there, not pit, brake, that white line there. If you brake at that white line, you'll make turn 1 when you come out of the pits. Okay, I'm going to mention as well, I'm going to do a slowish out lap here. When it comes to qualifying, guys, don't push like a madman on your out lap. If you do, you'll hurt your tyres, you'll have less grip on your flying lap. At the same time, don't go too slow, because if your tyres go cold, you won't have any grip. Now, interestingly, around this circuit, there are a few braking zones, there's a few braking points. But none of them are particularly massive. You've got turn 1 and heading up to the chicane on the bendy back straight. They are big braking zones, or big braking areas. Everywhere else for me is fairly gentle on the brakes. Mention something to you straight away. Coming up to the chicane at the moment, the way my gears are set up, I can go through this chicane in either first or second gear. However, if I take it in second gear, there is much less chance of wheel spin on the exit of the corner. If I take it in first, there's much more chance of spinning. Okay, let's get straight into it then. So, barrelling down at the start, finish straight. Got to be careful, the track does bend a little bit, and the braking point is about the start of the curve on the left, coming up now. Slightly blind apex, but the apex never moves. Getting up to third and lift off straight away, but then keep third for the corner. braking point there is the end of the AstroTurf on the right, and I'm offline because I'm talking. I will look at that in slightly better detail in a moment. These corners, love them. Done in a bit too soon. But they are two surprisingly pretty quick corners, which take it better than what I just did there. So I'm going to drop it down to first gear for the chicane on this occasion, so you can see what it might be like. I had to short shift. If I didn't, I would lose in the rear. The final corner's a tricky one. If you go in too fast, you'll end up in the gravel. You've got to be a little bit patient around there. Okay, let's see it go again. Let's see if we can do a little bit better. So the braking point is crucial here. We try and brake in a straight line. Now those two corners are two of the trickier corners around this track. And the hairpin, you have to be very, very patient on the way in. If you're impatient and get on the throttle too soon, you'll end up in the gravel. Now, although there's quite a bit of tyre noise coming, I'm not too worried about that. This track is a little bit of a tyre killer. I'm not overheating the tyres. Okay, going to go second gear this time. Short shift to try and control that wheel spin there. Not the greatest of laps, but not absolutely terrible. Unlike at Le Mans, it was much more difficult for me to talk about what I was doing as I was going round on the lap then. And that is why I'm going to do the corner by corner guide. Now, I am aware that around this track there are potentially a few different lines that people can take through corners. I can only show you how I like to do it. Okay, so on approach to turn 1, I do try and approach in a straight line as possible, and then around about the 150, getting close to the 100 metre marker board, you may have noticed I like to give a little bit of a turn just so that I can then be going straight when I hit the brakes. And as I mentioned, braking point is at the start of the curb, so it's at 100 metres. If you brake at that point on the racing line, you'll make this corner every single time, as long as you're braking off. If you happen to be on the right hand side of the track, you can still brake at this point, but you have to stay on the brakes pretty much all the way to the apex curb. If you don't, you'll go straight on. I would not recommend braking after the 100 metre marker board, because if you do, you're going to go deep into the corner and lose time on the exit. Okay, brake in as straight a line as possible, keeping it over towards the left hand side of the track. Now, I wasn't looking sort of what is in front of me when I turn in for this corner. It is a blind apex. Now for me on this view, there is another handy sort of signal that lets me know it's the right time to turn in, and hopefully I'll be able to transfer that to a turning point for you. And for me, as I'm approaching this corner, I am looking at the apex curb and the apex cone, right? And what I'm waiting for is the moment the apex curb goes behind my mirror. Okay, there. So this is around about the point that I'm going to be starting to think about turning in. So as it's coming past the mirror, so it's going to be sort of just before the AstroTurf, right? But try and turn in late. Don't shorten or don't cut across the track in the braking zone towards the apex. Brake in a straight line, do one sweeping turn. And the aim here is to get your right front wheel into this groove, right? If you can get your car into this position, you can really open up the exit of the corner. You have to be careful of too much throttle, too much steering, but it works out as a much better racing line. I will show you an alternate way of taking it shortly that won't be as nice. So this is the aim, to get the right front wheel clipping the apex curb, and that allows you on the exit of the corner to now see exactly where you're going. With it being a tight hairpin, be very, very careful in first gear with the amount of steering angle you have to put on. A short shift to second gear is very, very useful here. Now, what happens in these next 3 corners could depend on the gear ratio you use, but the physical process of what you do, or what I do with my accelerator, brake and steering, you should be able to do regardless of what gear ratio you have. The differences may be that you may need a change of gear before some of the corners, or between some of the corners. Okay, so on exit of the corner we short shift, and we want to let the car run towards the left a little bit, but not all the way. If your left wheels are touching the curb over on the left that's in front of us, you're going in too deep to the corner, you're ending up too wide. Now the reason we don't want to go all the way over there is because there's an awkward left hand corner coming up, so we need to get over to the right hand side of the track. Now one of the ways that I like to approach this corner is to short shift into second, and then at the right time for third gear is my signal to get ready to lift. So pretty much I pop it into third and then I lift. May seem a bit fucking mental to do that, but a lot of it's to do with weight transfer and engine braking. So if you're driving along with your foot to the floor, if you lift off, your car will slow down at a certain rate, and if you're in a different gear it may slow down at another different rate. But I just like the process of popping it up to third, lift, and then I can take this corner in third gear. It can be done in second gear. I can't say I've tried it in fourth, and I wouldn't want to. But the lift also has a secondary benefit, and that is it assists with the initial turning into this corner. So regardless of what gear you use to go around this corner, having the lift will help. So up into third, lift, and then as we're next to this grass crete on the right hand side of the track, we can begin our turn in. Now you can kind of stay on the throttle once you've done your lifting and started turning in. Really do hate the sound of this car on cold tyres, but the idea is to not go over the apex curb. If you get up and over the apex curb, chances are you're going to spin. It's a nasty little bastard, it's a nasty little fucker. But the idea is to try and stay as close to it as possible, and then probably 4 or 5 meters before the end of the curb we can allow the car to run out wide, and this is where me using third gear allows that to be one sweeping motion around the corner with no gear changes, no having to lift off or brake, and I end up being out by the exit curb. then I'm able to drive in as straight a line as possible, because even though this is all a bit of a curve, I cut it down to, we've just gone around one corner, now I'm making a straight, and then we've got another corner. Now, I am fully aware that this is a potential overtaking place and people will want to chuck it up the inside all day long. It is not the fastest way around this corner, or the corner that follows, right? So what I'm going to show you here is the way that I feel is the fastest way around this corner and the next corner. The only issue with it is if you've got a car behind you, they're probably going to just chuck it up the inside because they see space and they listen to Ayrton Senna, and unfortunately it's not relevant in this occasion, because if they chuck it up the inside here, they're going to be wide on the exit of this corner, then they're going to have to go slower through the next corner because they're too tight around that bend. Fucks everything up. But anyway, so as we approach the braking zone here, sticking to the right hand side, as we get closer and closer to the AstroTurf, now we can hit the brakes, and the aim here is to hit the brakes and get the braking done before we actually turn in. If you have steering angle applied when you're braking, it kills your tyres and doesn't slow you down as well. So if you brake in a straight line, you come to a stop quicker. So try and brake in as straight a line as possible. And then I'm taking this corner in second gear. Now I take a latish turn in, sort of as there's a little bit of a change in tarmac colour in front of me, just before the end of the curb on the right and just as the curb on the left is about to go out of screen. That is when I will begin my turn in. Now many people may see this as, like, if you looked at it from this position, you could say, oh well, he's not turning in, he's missed the apex, he's turning in too late, he's gone deep. Well, no, because it's all about where the car's going to be positioned when I get to the apex, right? And people will have different apex points around this corner, but this is the way I like to do it. And the aim here is to be slower on the way in into this corner and to make sure that I can position the car here. So just at this change of sort of concrete, we've got the gutter, some slabs, and then we've got grasscrete. So in this transitional phase of the just beyond the curb, I want to be in this position so that as I exit the corner, I'm in this position and now I can directly see the corner ahead. This will allow me to accelerate out of this corner, give a tiny little lift but staying on the throttle, and then power through this right-hander. So as I exit this corner, I'll be able to accelerate, lift a little bit, but I'll still be on the throttle, and then I can just turn in and power all the way through this corner, right? I'm just going to quickly show you what happens, or the way many people, you might see many people take these corners. I'd like to say I did that on purpose, but I really didn't. Okay, so the way that many people will attack this corner is to end up in this position. Right, let's just change view and come back a little bit. Right, I'm just using this view so that you can see. Right, so many people will approach this corner more in this position, right? Which means that they apex the corner earlier before the gutter. Then by the end of the gutter, it's pushing them out wide. And now, when you compare the view of the corners, I had a very open view of the corner, whereas here, okay, I can see the apex curve, but I can't see fuck all else around the wall. So as you approach this corner, now you've got to be lifting. If you're not lifting, you're not making the corner, so you'd be slowing down around this corner and steering more, then trying to get on the power and potentially spinning. So turning in later gives a later apex, which gives a better exit of the left-hander, which opens up the right-hander and allows you to carry much more speed through the corner. Okay, now we're heading towards two of my favourite corners on this track. We nail it absolutely flat out heading down here. Some people may try overtaking here, it can be done, but it is a little bit tricky. The braking point for this corner is the start of the white line here, and that you can pretty much go for that with most race cars. Now personally, I've got my gears set so I can just be in 5th gear a little bit before this point, so that I can apply a little bit of brake. It's not a heavy braking zone, it's a little bit of brake, pop it down to 4th gear, so I'm only going down the 1 gear, keep us straight as long as we can ish, and then absolutely nail it around this corner flat out. Try and avoid the curb on the left. If you get on it, it will want to suck you off towards the left and potentially spin. Now if you find that you are ending up all over that curb all of the time, either try turning in a little bit later or don't slow down as much. As crazy as that sounds, this is a fast corner. The slower you go round it, the more your car can steer, but you don't want it to steer loads, you want to go around the corner faster. So try and take this at full speed in 4th gear once you've applied a little bit of brake and gone from 5th to 4th, then take this flat out. But be aware that as soon as you are around this corner, you do not want to be going all the way over to the right hand side of the track if you can help it. If you do find yourself going over there, chances are you're going to have to slow down a lot for this next right-hander. But we want to exit the left-hander in the middle of the road, or there or thereabouts, so that we can then swing the car towards the left-hand side, aiming towards the end of the curb on the left. We can then begin to start braking, and this corner can actually be done in 3rd gear, but it's very hit or miss. You have to be absolutely spot on with your braking point and your line. 2nd gear will do this corner all day long, right? So go for 2nd gear, and once you've been getting it consistently right, give 3rd gear a go. Okay, so as we get to the end of the curve, we're going to a little bit of brake, knock it down to 2nd gear, and then we can begin to turn in. And because this corner is cambered, once you've started turning in, you can actually be very, very aggressive on your throttle as long as you're not steering too much. You can really push through this corner. The camber and the car absolutely love it. Sorry about the car, the noise. Okay, now we're heading down to the hairpin, right? There are a few potential lines that could be taken around the hairpin. One of them is hugging the apex all the way around the corner. Another one is turning in later and then hugging the apex curb from about midpoint. Another way is going straight on into the gravel or cutting the corner. Personally, I like to try and kind of go between hugging the apex curb all the way round and turning in that little bit later, right? And it's all to do with the exit of the corner, because I love this hairpin, but it's also an absolute evil bitch. And it's not because of the entry or the midpoint, it's all to do with the exit, but the exit all depends on how you've done the entry and the midpoint. Okay, now no matter what car you're in at this track, use the start of this concrete on the left as your initial braking point guide. So that is your brake marker, right? You will then, by braking at this point, find out if you can brake a little bit later or have to brake a little bit sooner. You'll either end up in the gravel or you'll make the corner. Okay, it's one of those two things. In this car, if you brake at this point, you'll make this corner easy all fucking day long. You can go a tiny bit beyond it, and by tiny bit I do mean only about one car's width, length even. So even that would probably be a bit too much. So literally get to the end of the concrete and then go like one brake and you'd be fine. Hit the brakes hard initially, but then start coming off them gradually as you work your way down the gears. Personally, I'm taking this corner in 2nd gear, and I try and stay over to the left as long as possible. I could begin turning in at this point and then try and hug the apex all the way round, but my mid-corner speed is potentially going to be slower, and given the way that I like to drive around this corner, that won't work for me. So what I try and do is just go on a little bit further, so where the wider bit of grass creep next to me is just about going out of shot, now I can start turning in, right? And by this point we are well off the brakes. We've done all of our braking, we've done all of our downshifting. Now what we have to do is turn and wait. If from this point to the apex point you apply too much throttle, you will go off the track wide on the exit of the corner. So the trick here is to carry enough speed from this point to the apex, right? If you slow down too much, then you'll feel like you'll need to speed up towards the apex. However, if you haven't braked too hard, right, so brake hard initially but then let it off a decent amount, and then let the car roll down the hill towards the apex. And the reason for that is, once you get to the apex clipping point, which is approximately here, now we can start feeding the throttle back on and hopefully not have to take it off again. If you go bang flat out, you're going to spin. But if you gradually, I'm going to use the brake pedal as the guide here, you look at the white bit, if you gradually bring it on from this point, and then as we get to here where we can now see the green AstroTurf, around about here we should be able to feed much more throttle on, and then as we realise at this point, yes, we can make it with flat out. So from midpoint to exit point, gradually apply the throttle until at this point you are now absolutely flat out, because the last thing you want to do here is get your left wheels on that curb. If you do get your left wheels on the curb on the left of us, straighten up your wheel as quickly as you can. If you don't, Steve F1, this is for you. If you don't, you'll do a Steve F1 and end up driving a little drive down that service road on the right, totally out of control. So the trick to that hairpin is to turn and wait. Okay, once we're through the hairpin, absolutely piss easy, full blast through the Schumacher S's. Don't apply too much steering here. In this car, you don't need to touch the curb on the left. So absolutely flat out. You can use a little bit of the curb on the right if you want to, but again, absolutely flat out. Now again, for me, I've got my gears set up to just get into 6th gear up here. If you go for a slightly longer gear ratio, you may only get to 5th. Personally, I like to be in 6th here so that I can go down 2 or 3 gears for this corner. Helps with the engine braking for me and my own personal timing. In this car, you can brake quite late for this corner. In many other cars, don't. But for this car, use the service road on the right of us here as the start of it, as get ready to brake in a second, mate. You're going to have to fucking brake in a moment, because when you get to the 100-metre marker board and the start of the AstroTurf, that's when we want to be hitting the brakes. But this is a high speed straight into a medium speed corner, and we don't need to brake that hard. And that's why I like to use the downshifts. So pop it down to 4th, preferably 3rd probably in this car with this gear ratio. And the reason for that is, by popping it into 3rd and keeping it quite high in the rev range, it means I can get back on the throttle. So as we're gently slowing down, we've now done all of our braking, we've got it down to 3rd gear by the end of the AstroTurf on the right that's just gone beyond the front of the car, that bit. So by this point we've done our slowing down, we've now got the car down to the required gear, for me 3rd, and then on the next service road we can start turning in. And the aim here is to get our left wheels touching the green bit of AstroTurf at the apex. Where we can see the white painted line actually that's sort of between the track and the curb, there's a black tyre mark on the white painted stripe, right? Between the curb and the track. That black mark is around about the point where we want to be getting over the AstroTurf. Okay, if you come in too soon, you'll go deep. So what I'm aiming for effectively is this black mark we can see on the white line just above my cockpit now. So we'd start turning in at the service road, but we want to get our left wheels onto the AstroTurf here, and the reason for that is it helps pull the car around the corner. If you miss this AstroTurf and miss the curb, you may find that you start running wider and wider and wider, and it's an interesting trick to this corner. If you get your wheels on the AstroTurf and the curb, you can go fast around the corner. Try it, you'll be surprised. So anyway, so this corner can be done at very high speed in third gear and staying on throttle all the way through the exit of the corner. Now, in an ideal world, you wouldn't exit that corner on the right hand side of the track, but because you can carry so much speed through that corner, you will find yourself over to the right hand side of the circuit. And the next trick here is, can you get round this corner without braking, or at least with barely fucking touching the brake? Now, it can be done. You can stay, if you're on my gear ratio, you can stay in third gear, just move the car over towards the left hand side of the track, and as you get to the white line you can lift off, you can turn in, and you can get back on the power and go full throttle and absolutely nail this corner. The aim for that right hander is, once you have turned in, is to get on the throttle as soon as possible and not take it off. You'll be surprised it can be done. And in turn, what that does is gives you a brilliant run onto the bendy straight. And then we're up to arguably the worst corners on this track. Now, in this car, some people may find that they can brake a little bit beyond the 100-meter marker board and make the corner. Yeah, you may be able to, but if you brake the 100-meter marker board, you'll go through the corner quicker, just to let you know. So anyway, 100-meter marker board is effectively your braking point for this corner, whether you are on the right hand side or the left hand side. If you're on the left hand side of the track, you're going to have to stay on the brakes longer. Have you noticed there's a bit of a continuity to this? Turn one, if you're up the inside, you can brake at the same point, but you have to stay on the brakes for longer. Oh, here, if you're up the inside, you can brake at the same point, but you've got to stay on the brakes for longer. So it works everywhere, guys, by the way, pretty much. Okay, so braking point is at the 100-meter marker board, and hit those brakes hard. The last thing you want to do is get to the end of the braking zone and then go, shit, I need to slow down more. Get your fucking braking done. It's better to come off the brakes and roll towards the corner than it is to have to try and bang them on more when you're already fucking fully braking. So anyway, brake in a nice straight line, get it down to second gear. If you need to use first, but be aware it's going to want to spin you on the second part of this chicane, so be prepared to short shift. Service road on the right of us there, we want to turn in just before that, and for this corner in this car, preferably don't touch the larger part of the curb. Just get the left wheel nicely on the shallower part of the curb, the first stage, and it opens up the second part quite nicely for us. And again, don't hit the larger part of the curb, just clip the first stage of the curb. Doing it in second gear, you should come through here comfortably. If you're still spinning in second, potentially you are steering too much. Okay, on the exit of that corner, we're absolutely flat out, and then we are into what should be a really easy corner, but it is a tricky little bitch. Now I'm just going to position my car here. There's a couple of sort of tricks to this corner, and one of them is that the faster you go in, the slower you come out, right? The slower you go in, the faster you come out, but if you go in way too slow, you're just going to get fucking punted into the crowd, right? So the trick here is to balance minimal braking, a little bit of weighting, and then aggressive on the throttle and potentially short shifts, and being what's the word, hopeful that the car will make the corner. The other two tricks are don't hit the pit wall and don't go in the gravel on the exit. If you do, you're probably going to spin. Now if you're losing the rear end around this corner, it could be from steering too much with too much acceleration. It could be that you're staying in too low a gear for too long as well. Okay, so on approach to this corner, in many cars you do have to brake quite early. In this car, because it's so good, you really don't have to sort of lift off and brake that early. So I would be tempted to say, from the sort of laps that I've done, the cone that is on the right of me dictating the pit entry, around about there I think is where I was I braking that? I thought I'd seen another cone. I will double check it on the next lap I do, but it could be that at that cone, that is where I am off the throttle and waiting, right? But I will confirm that on the next lap. So we approach this corner in a straight line. Yeah, the cone is where I'm definitely off throttle. I'm going to keep going in a straight line until the curb on the left of us starts turning left, so where the white line splits. And I'm going to approach this corner in second gear, and you'll notice that on this line I am not trying to get over to the apex curb nice and early. Effectively, I don't want to get my right wheels alongside the apex curb until I'm next to the pit wall. Okay, that's what I am aiming for. The earlier you are to that curb in comparison to the wall, the more chance there is of you running wide on the exit. So it's kind of like a slightly late-ish turn in here, but it's a gradual turn in while still off the throttle. But then as we get to the pit wall, we can start feeding that throttle back on, and once the corner has opened up, the view has opened up, by this point you should know, or hopefully you'll be able to know, whether you're going to make the exit or not, whether you're going to run wide or not, because at this point you want to be able to be absolutely flat out in either second gear or third gear and allow the car to run over to the left and clip the exit curb. Fairly simple, really. Okay, I'm going to jump back to the pits and then we'll do 2 more laps at speed. I'll do one on the racing line and check the braking point for that final corner, and then I'll do one off the racing line, so whether you're defending or attacking. I'm just going to quickly go the wrong way here rather than having to do a full lap to warm up. Get quite to full speed down here, but the process is still going to be the same. So remember, brake in as straight a line as possible. Curb, then it sent me a little bit wide. It was minimal braking to be able to make that corner. get the left wheels on the curb. Oh, turned a little too much there, but still made the corner. Yeah, so just before the pit entry, or where the cone is on the pit wall, sorry, on the pit entry, is where I'm sort of lifting and braking. Okay, I'm going to go for one more hot lap here. Where the sooner you're on the throttle, the wider you are at that point. Gotta be patient. No brakes, can be done. Okay, now I'm going to do one lap being off the racing line, so attacking or defending. So I can brake at the same point, 100 metres. We've got to stay on the brakes all the way into the apex. Okay, if you're up the inside here, if you do pop it up to third, you're going to have to come back down to second, otherwise you're not going to get around the corner. If you're going to be up the inside here, braking is difficult. Chances are you might also need first gear. Be careful if you're out wide here. Okay, up the inside here can be done at quite a decent speed. Just have to knock it down an extra gear. Okay, the hairpin. People are going to try it. Careful on the way out, because you're steering more, it's going to want to spin, and if you're up the inside here, you can still go flat out, but be careful on the curbs. Okay, so this is where probably the second most overtaking place people will use. So, brake at the 100 metres. You will need first gear. If you're up the inside in the final corner, you've got to wait a little bit longer before you get on the power. And it's a time loss, what, 4.5 seconds slower being off the racing line. Okay, there you go. Track guide done, unless I've forgotten anything, which I don't think I have. But anyway, yeah, this could be a very interesting race around this track if people don't dive bomb. I'm not saying that people do dive bomb, because I've been seeing some brilliant racing in DGT League recently. Excuse me. So yeah, even though there is like turn one hairpin, the other hairpin, the penultimate corner chicane, they tempt you to overtake. But what I would say is, get someone else off the racing line, make them defend, and drive past them on the exit of the corner. Much easier, much better, much more controllable. Anyway, that's it, me done. This one's taken about 50 minutes, yeah. So that's it. Have a good weekend, everybody, and I shall see you later.